All right. Well, hey, thank you very much for meeting with me. If we could just start just by some brief introductions with your name, when you entered service, where you're born, that sort of thing.
Gotcha. So I'm Colin Gorman. I was born in Redwood City, California. Moved out to Arkansas when I was about 11. I joined the Marine Corps in January of 1997, between my freshman and sophomore year of college. I had changed schools in high school. I went from Central to Catholic High, and there's a guy there, Father Tribu, who kicked my tail pretty good. I knew I still had some more work to do, so that's why I joined. I thought the Marine Corps, they were the toughest, baddest. So I was like, well, I'll try that. And so I joined in 97. Went to boot camp in 97, and then infantry school, came to India Company. After infantry school, I guess in December of 97. And I was in through 2005. The last year and a half was in active reserve, so my active time actually ended in Iraq in 03.
Okay. And then did you continue with the reserve unit after that deployment, or did you just get out after?
Yeah, so my reserve time, my active reserve time ended, so I went IRR right after we got back. And it was honestly one of the hardest decisions I ever made, was to sign that piece of paper.
Yeah.
It's a lot of camaraderie that you build up and everything we've been through,
Sure. Okay. Well, talking about everything you've been through, let's start with just kind of chronologically the first couple of times you went to annual training.
Mm-hmm.
Tell me about that.
So the first one we went to was that I went to was in Hawaii, and I was the platoon commander's radio man, and I would have given anything for a new pair of boots. I was just slipping on the rocks in Hawaii the whole time. You would have thought Hawaii would be a great gig, but not when you're climbing those razor sharp mountains. And then we did a couple CACs, which I believe is combined armed exercise in 29 Palms, hotter than heck. Those were they were fun. You learned a lot. I think I could be wrong, but I think the Marine Corps at the time was the only unit that used fire and maneuver in their training.
Sure.
So give you a real sense of you've got live rounds going down range and you're maneuvering next to other Marines, simulating combat situation. And then we did an annual training. We did a NATO mission in Albania for a few weeks, where we they were building a road. The Seabees were building a road to Kosovo, and we were in charge of security on the base and in transit and the actual job site. And then we actually had 19 hours of liberty in Amsterdam on the way back, and 50 Marines successfully handled liberty and got back on the plane on time, so that was a success. And then I think I went to not infantry school, I went to the squad leaders course, and then in 2003 I got called to active duty for, it was Operation Enduring Freedom is what it started as, and then turned into Iraqi Freedom.
Okay, so you were activated for Enduring Freedom, and then you eventually changed over and went to Iraqi Freedom. Can you tell me about that? Like where were you when you got the word? Or let me back up, right?
Sure.
So today happens to be September 11th, 2019. Yeah. So let me ask you that, right? So you joined in 1997.
Right.
So where were you on this date 18 years ago in 2001?
No one ever forgets that, right? Sorry, I get a little emotional thinking about it. I had been done. I'd gone to work late that day, so I was still at the house. I went on a run, and I heard it on the radio, and I thought it was like a War of the Worlds type thing. Like, this isn't real, And I flipped on the TV and saw it, and I went into work. I was a CPA. I went into downtown Little Rock for work, and I called the unit. I was like, all right, I'm ready to go. Where are we going? And they're like, just, hold on, we'll call you, So I kept waiting for that phone to ring, but then it was, I guess, a year and a half later. I remember calling the unit it was like late February, and I was there was some benefit for like dental insurance or something the reservists could get, and I was calling the unit trying to figure that out, and they're like, why don't you just wait till next week? It's like they knew we were getting called up, but they couldn't tell me. It's like, just Gorman, don't worry about that. Just hang on, hold tight. It's like, okay. So I got the call. I was a CPA. It was late February during the middle of tax season. I think I had 6 days to report. I said, all right. I told folks I was working with, here's what I'm working on, and I'll see y'all later. And they're real good to me, though. They left my off. The Soldiers and Sailors Act protects you a little bit, but they were great to me. They, my office was still right as I left it when I got back, so I appreciated that.
So in the command chronologies of the unit, it talks about what you were doing in January versus when you got the call up, like you said, in late February, early March. Do you remember the progression there, or how that went? What you were doing, how your job changed within the unit?
So I was a squad leader for our infantry unit. I can't remember the particular weekends. We were lucky that at Camp Robinson, we got thousands of acres to use, so we were able to do a lot of live fire events and land navigation, that I think a lot of reserve units didn't have the opportunity to do. I mean, pretty much every month we had access to that. So we were doing that kind of training. It's mostly woods, and then again, like I said, late February we got the call, and I think it was, I was looking at my notes, I think it was March 5th, we went to 29 Palms to start training. So we're doing a lot of desert activity, a lot of mount, a lot of urban combat scenarios.
Sure. Do you remember when the mission changed? Because Enduring Freedom was Afghanistan. That's where you thought you were going.
Okay. No, I don't. To be honest with you, I don't remember that. Okay. That change. I think was Enduring Freedom was. I guess I thought that was more of a humanitarian type operation. So I don't know. I don't know. It's when we finally got the orders to go to Kuwait if that changed, but I don't honestly, I don't recall.
Okay.
Do you know?
Well, so yeah, in the record, Enduring Freedom, right, is Afghanistan.
Okay.
In the command chronology, it states it changed while you were at 29 Palms.
Okay.
And so the training took a focus on less conventional and then more urban, which was Iraq.
Gotcha.
Right?
Okay.
You got a few pictures there in Kuwait City.
The icebox.
Yeah, tell me about that. What was the transition like going from here to Little Rock to Kuwait City, and then eventually on to Al Quds?
So we were in Kuwait. I remember we had a private. It was a chartered flight, so there were flight attendants, but we had all our weapons and on the plane, and a few of us had ammunition. And I remember part of the briefing was, you fasten your seatbelts, but please point your muzzles of your weapons towards the rear of the aircraft. That was part of their safety brief, which you usually don't get that on a commercial flight. So yeah, I got a good picture of a M16 and grenade launcher in my hand on the airplane. When we got to Kuwait, again we were in some tents that we usually had rolled up because it was pretty hot. We were continuing to climatize. We were doing things like we had like night vision lasers on our M16s that we were sighting in and kind of getting prepared. I remember we all got smallpox vaccine, so we all have one sleeve rolled up, letting that take effect. Like I said, I think we were only there for 7-8 days.
In Kuwait.
And then I remember, so we took C-130s from Kuwait and landed on Blair Field, which I assumed was named after the Prime Minister at the time, Tony Blair. And that was in Al Quds. And I remember, landing, and the back of the C-130 goes down. I'm like, all right, it's game time. Here we go. So.
Sure. So what was the icebox? So you have a picture of that specifically, right?
Just trying to have fun with the irony of it, right? It was the complete opposite of I don't know what the temperature was at the time, but I know when we were in Iraq, I had a little REI thermometer that went up to 120 degrees. That's where it maxed out. And for a month straight, it was 120. And it was funny, if you brought it towards your body, it would go down, right? Because your body's at 96 degrees. So if I had it real close to me, it actually went down. And the battalion aid station, I forget, they registered some stupid, I can't remember what it was, 130 something, I think was the max that they recorded.
Sure.
And
there's a couple different bases that you've got pictured there. One was Al Qut, one was Al Suwariya.
Al Suwaira, I think.
So, yeah. What was the significance of those places?
So we went to, I'd have to look at we went to quite a few different places. So Al Qut was our main base of operations that we operated out of. We were there for a good while at first. So we were there, and there was a college in Al Qut that we took over for a little while that we ran operations out of. And then we'd come back to our main base in Al Qut. And basically it was old bombed out Iraqi barracks. I remember we had to sweep the rooms we were sleeping in. And we had, just rolled mats that we would sleep on. I think later on, a month or two in, we finally got some cots, and we would sleep, on the top of the building, so it was cooler at night. So we operated out of that. That school for a while, and I don't know who they were. Our guess was, CIA or some sort of special forces that, I don't know if I'm allowed to say this or not. I guess you can delete it. But so when we first got there, and a couple other places we went to, we would go on patrol, and some of these guys would be with us, and then they just kind of peel off on patrol, and we'd come back on base with a couple less people. Because how many Marines you have on patrol is important.
Right.
You need to know that. So, and then we spent some time. I remember we spent some time at an old ammo depot. It was just my squad, and I think we had not my squad. I think it was my platoon, and we had a weapons squad attached to us, where we had found. I've got pictures of there just. Miles of underground ammo stations, and we would find. Because I remember we slept out in basically the dirt for a good week or so at one of these ammo sites, and that we eventually blew up the cache, but. We had to go around to all the different, there's people living around there. We had to go, get them out of there. We had to clear a mile-long area because that blast would, destroy windows and things like that. Sorry, I'm running all over the place here. We also went to, then we would come back to Al Qut. So different platoons would maybe go off to different areas and do different things. I had a buddy who went to Babylon for a reason. I didn't get that opportunity and came back. Some folks went to Baghdad and did some things, but we always came back to Al Qut. Because again, that was our main hub, and sometimes we wouldn't take all our gear with us. We'd take a lighter pack for just going somewhere for a week. And then I think Al Suwaira was the raids that we did. It was a town that we basically had a lead on a bunch of Ba'athist, sympathizers or former political folks.
Anybody from the famous deck of cards?
Not that I was privy to.
Okay.
So that was above my pay grade. Because I think I hadn't picked up sergeant yet. I think I was still a corporal at that point. I was a fire team leader. But we rode. It's crazy. We rode all night. Kind of in the cover of darkness. And I remember before we went, the chaplain had kind of a ceremony and anointed us with oil and that kind of stuff. Like, 'cause we knew we were going in to kick doors and and grab some folks. We had snipers, we had tanks, we had helos in support of us. And I know the mission that my squad went on, we were trying to get in the front gate of this Baptist house, pretty nice house. Let's call it an estate maybe, and scared the crap out of us. Over in the side gate, the wife and kids poked their head out, like trying to figure out what these guys are doing. So we go in through the house. I was looking at my notes the other day, and we found, we captured the guy. We zip tied him and put him in the 5-ton, and we found machine guns and gas masks and ammo and all sorts of he had on top of his house he had like a little, I call it like a machine gun nest or something up there. And we met up with some of the other units, and I remember it was just a surreal moment at there's some other raids we went on too after that. There was a factory and some other places that we cleared out. But I remember at the end of it, I think it was just a real long day, basically. We started that morning and hit them all. We're sitting in the 5-ton, and we had probably 5 or 6 of these Baptist guys. They're zip tied, they've got covers on their eyes or over their head, and I look back and there's like tanks blocking a bridge with like all these people on it, helicopters just hovering over us because we're all kind of coming back together. It's just like a surreal moment in in a war movie or something. During those raids, there were a few people were injured. I remember one guy got shot he was clearing a room, and a guy shot his AK through the wall and got a bullet in his calf. But I remember a 3-star general came and pinned his Purple Heart on him afterwards. I think it was Mad Dog Mattis, but I can't recall. A picture there was him, or in your other book. And after that, we took over this old Baptist headquarters there in Osawara, and we operated out of there for quite a while. I'd have to look back at my notes, but we were there for quite a bit. I know I got a bout of dysentery. That was fun. We had the prisoners. We weren't in charge of that. Another, I don't know if that was maybe an Army intelligence unit or something was in charge of the prisoners and their security. We didn't mess with them. They didn't mess with us. But yeah, I lost a good 10 pounds with some dysentery there. We did a lot of patrols out of that base. I remember, you do basically our whole routine there on patrols is you had 8 hours on, 8 hours where you're reactionary force, geared up, ready for whatever, and then 8 hours off. And I think we came back to Al Qud again, and then we went to, Al Hay maybe? I think maybe it was Al Hay. Yeah, that was a police station, and that place was, that place just had a bad feeling. When we first got there, the units before us, they had all sorts of like people around the comp. It wasn't very well secured, and so we made some changes and didn't let the people hang around. Didn't trust. We kept a good segregation between us and the police there. So it was a police station, but we were there. But there was also Iraqi local police, and I remember they had prisoners there too. And it was striking to me that the only way the prisoners could eat is if their family brought them food, because we would have to let folks into where we were staying, and totally different than our system. Right. If you didn't have family and they didn't bring you food, they didn't eat. And then we went to. I'm just kind of rattling off stories here. I probably talk all day, but then we came back to Al Qud again, and then we went to the Iranian border, which was pretty cool. It was the whole area seemed like it was pockmarked with years of fighting between between the people. But it was this, we called it the castle. It was it was bombed out. Who knows how long it had been there. But 1,800 meters away was the Iranian castle on the Iranian side. And I knew it was 1,800 meters because one of the turrets had, like, scratched into the wall, had, like, the range of the other castle. And every once in a while we'd get a helo or something fly over, and you'd see the folks on the Iranian castle, getting their weapons down. And I liked that place, though, because we were mechanized, so it was no longer foot patrols. We would go through town, or we would go, patrol the border. One time we all stop, and we get, the road was actually the border between Iraq and Iran, and so we all get on the other side on the Iranian border. A little sign, Marines take Iran. On my little board at home, I count Iran. I say I've been there before. And then there was I guess a border, and there was kind of like a DMZ zone. Mm-hmm. And they would, let folks, through. And I remember one time, I guess the Iranians were trying to push people back from the DMZ. They started, I don't know if they're firing in the air or firing in the crowd, and people started flowing over these berms. And on either side of the berm were landmines. And I remember when we were out there, a civilian stepped on the landmine. And I can't remember, I've got it in my book which dock it was. But he ran out in that minefield and grabbed that civilian and pulled him back in. And I remember I ran down there because people were mm-hmm. surrounding him. I was going down to make sure our dock was okay. And it was crazy. The guy was okay because it was cauterized. The way the explosion went off, it cauterized the wound. Wow. So the guy was just in shock, and they wound up getting him to a local hospital. And then we were actually ended up being relieved by Ukrainians at when we were at that castle. That was sort of the end mm-hmm. of our time there. And I was a squad leader at that point. I gotten promoted. And so I got a couple, I think, are interesting stories. My mother was an anthropologist. My folks were in the Peace Corps. Okay. I joined the Marine Corps. That was my form of rebellion. But I kept having these moments where I was like, man, my mom would love this because she's a cultural anthropologist. So we were getting relieved by the Ukrainians, and I stayed back to help, show them the routes, introduce them to our interpreters. If memory serves me, we had to have 2 interpreters. We had to have Ukrainian to Russian, a Russian to English and an English to Arabic, because we didn't have a Russian to, I think that's how that went. So they had to have 2 interpreters because there weren't very many people who could do Arabic to Russian, I think. Mm-hmm. I may have blown that story, but so I stayed back for a few more days there, and the Ukrainians were in charge, and I was patrolling with them, showing them the ropes. But I was there for their Independence Day from the old Soviet Union. Okay. And they had little 11-ounce cans of vodka. And I remember, and a guy had a saxophone. I don't know where this guy from Ukraine got a saxophone, but I remember sitting there drinking 11-ounce cans of vodka, which you're not supposed to have, but it had been culturally rude not to, on the Iranian border in Iraq on the Ukrainian Independence Day, listening to this guy play. Like, when is this moment ever going to happen again in life? Never, right. So anyway, I could probably tell 100 little stories like that. No,
that's great. That's what I like to hear. So backtracking a little bit, just from what you were saying, you said you'd gotten promoted during the deployment. Your citation says it's a meritorious promotion. How did that come about? What?
I don't remember any particular, thing I did. I assumed it was just I was being a good fire team leader, and doing my job and keeping my Marines safe. I had been a squad leader before, but when we got mobilized, we had some guys from California and Utah join us. Awesome Marines, still in contact with some of them now. But there were so many other sergeants that my I got pushed back down, so became a fire team leader again. My squad leader actually went. I think maybe they needed a need over in weapons, and I was doing a good job, and so I would say fairly early on into that time period, I got that field promotion. I'm very proud of it. Got it up on my wall at home. Meritorious field promotion in combat. And hey, brought all my Marines back home. So
yeah, I mean that it doesn't get any more successful than that. So you had mentioned that you had actually gotten dysentery at some point. Like, how do you deal with that? You're talking about 8 on, 8 quick reaction, 8 for a break. Oh, by the way, here's dysentery. Like, how do you?
You just take a couple Motrin and get back to work. No, I think maybe so I think I got an IV and a lot of quick trips to the bathroom, and I think one of my fire team leaders maybe stepped up for a day, or I think maybe some other squads maybe picked up some extra patrols, and my guys did more security on the base. So I wasn't down for too long, but yeah, it's lose a quick 10 pounds that way. So.
Sure. How long did that go on, and were you co-located with the battalion aid station, or was it just
no? So we were
just made you deal with it.
Yeah, it was dock and a cot and an IV hanging on the wall. So because we were, this was in Osawara, and a lot of guys did too. Got hit with it, kind of went through. I don't know if it was. I remember a point where there was a bunch of flies at one of the places we had stopped, and so I assume we all, they got under our water bottles and that kind of stuff, because it happened to one of my buddies. He was down longer than I was, but it kind of went through the platoon. But no, it was just had to let it run its course, and Doc would try to, keep some fluids in you.
Sure. There were other ailments. You said one guy had gotten a Purple Heart pinned on him from General Mattis, but then there's also a picture of a guy like holding a teddy bear. Can you talk about that?
Yeah. So the biggest guy in the platoon, or company rather. It's stressful, right? You're at war. You're prepared not to come home, and his hand would lock up. So bad at night that the docs, I don't know where we got a teddy bear from. It must have been maybe a care package from a school or something, but he would sleep with his teddy bear at night to keep his hand from tightening up. One of the more, probably more traumatic experiences for me was the at Al Qud, at that base, that the bombed out barracks. When we first got there, we were going to the bathroom and sawed off 55-gallon drums. I mean, there was no chow hall, there was no phone bank, there was no, I think I made a couple phone calls on a sat phone. There was none of those things. Towards the end of that deployment, I think when we got back from the Iranian border, there was like a chow hall and a phone bank and that kind of stuff that we could use, but for 6.5 out of the 7 months there was nothing. But the Seabees were building a kind of like a little rec room, I guess, that was climate controlled. I mean, it wasn't 71 degrees or anything. It was probably 85, but instead of 125, but one of the Seabees, I guess there was an unexploded like Cobra round, and he got his Gerber and he started turning it, and it went off, and it killed him, and it fragged his buddy. Because I remember it was, you could feel the boom in your bones, and I remember running out there, and I thought the guy had a broken arm, but he was actually fragged by the other guy's, bones were sticking out of him. I remember running, so I ran out there. And one of the docs ran out there too, and I remember running back to the radio, for them to phone it into battalion. It was the weirdest thing. It's like, you ever had that dream when you're like running in slow motion? It's like I felt like I couldn't run fast enough, to get to this radio so they could call it in. My take from this is going to be public record, so forgive me if I say this wrong, but when we first got there, it was 03. We were leaving the Marines that basically took the cities we were in. And this was kind of a new. We hadn't really fought. Most of our medical doctrine was still from kind of Vietnam era. Well, one of the things I love about the reserves is, you've got some folks that are older and have, real life experience. Well, our corpsmen, they weren't, and there was some great people serving for us, so no offense to them, but they're not a 19-year-old kid who's never seen, these are EMT and firefighters back home in Little Rock and the surrounding area. They've seen bullet wounds. So they told me that they didn't use the doctrine they'd been given, as corpsmen, but they used the things that they knew from, their real life experiences. And, so all of our guys were reservists, still one shot, one kill, but, I had a master's degree, I had as much education as my battalion commander, and I think that brought some maturity maybe to our unit. I think maybe, we were maybe a little more thoughtful. Maybe there's a reason we, helped us bring everybody, everybody back home with us. So, but, so that was one of the Seabees. So that guy wasn't, that fatality, he was not part of our unit per se.
Sure. Last question I have for you. Let me do two, right? So did you ever? So you talked about kind of some of the advantages of being in the reserve force, bringing in maybe a little bit more maturity, a little bit more education that wouldn't otherwise get on the active force, like the guys working out in Little Rock. Did you guys feel like you were adequately trained for the job? I mean, in the record, you're doing pretty basic stuff in January in 2003, but by the height of the summer, you're doing, like you said, almost something out of a movie with tanks on one side, helos flying.
That's a great question. I didn't feel underprepared. Now if you sat me down next to another corporal or sergeant from active duty, maybe I think there's a lot of things, a lot of acronyms and things like that that we don't pick up. As I'll talk to my cousin's he's a major in the Marine Corps, and he's using all these acronyms. I'm like, I don't even know what he's talking about, But I think being here at Camp Robinson, helped a lot. I mean, we did a lot of a lot of fire and maneuver, right? Mission of the Marine Corps Rifle Squad. A lot of our guys are hunters, and we'd go on. We have on our patrol a guy who tracks deer by looking at the leaves. I don't know. I think a lot of those things helped. So I think for what we were doing on a day-to-day basis, I think we were well equipped.
That's great. And then last question. This one's kind of for me. Jealously for the sake of the unit, right? So you had a guy in your squad named Prat.
Yes.
Tell me about him, and then I'll tell you about him after the fact.
Okay.
You have some notes in there that you were going to counsel him about.
Yeah, and I ran into him at the airport actually, maybe a year or two ago with my family, and he said some really nice things to me. So I appreciated that. But yeah, I remember. So Prat was he was a lance corporal in my squad, and super sharp guy, but he had questioned orders a lot. And while you don't want robots, right, you can appreciate people wanting to know why. In combat situation, you don't have time to ask why. You just need to do it. If I say, attack, or get your head down, don't. Why, Sergeant Gorman? Why should I do that? So, but I could, he was real smart, and I could tell. I put in my notes here that I could tell he'd be a great leader, and that's why I'm giving him such a hard time about. You got to be a good follower to also be a good leader, and I think. Just on a side note, a conversation I had with another Marine on a similar note, that he actually told me years later that he really appreciated that, which I appreciated the feedback. Marine reservists, when we're back home in our daily lives, we're probably like in the top of our food chain with friends, right? I mean, Marines, the few, the proud, right? So we're in our day-to-day lives, we're probably doing real well at our job or in school or whatever. Well, if you're a Lance Corporal and then, 1 weekend a month, 2 weeks a year, some corporals barking orders at you all day. You're not used to that, right? You're being top dog, and now you gotta follow orders. So it can be a hard transition, I think, for the first couple of years for especially young Marines. And I always encourage, man, wait till you get into a leadership role. You'll thrive, but you got to pay. I know you're top dog at home, but you got to pay your dues now. So what is Pratt doing now?
Well, I'm not sure what he's doing now, but I'm pretty sure he picked up major and graduated out of the company. He is no longer a company grade officer after having served a couple years as the company commander here. So your advice was well taken, and he certainly showed his leadership later on here in about 2015 timeframe as the company commander. So.
Well, he got the last laugh. I have to salute him now. So,
All right. Well, thank you very much.
Yeah,
I think we'll end the interview there.
Okay.